$520,000. That's what it cost me to keep my family from losing everything. And last night, they uninvited me from Thanksgiving. Hit like and drop a comment telling me where you're listening from. And tell me this. Have you ever been taken for granted by the people you love most? Iris Bennett always believed that responsibility wasn't something you claimed. It was something that claimed you. At 34, working as a systems analyst in Seattle, she lived a life of order. Color-coded calendars, redundant cloud backups, a kitchen drawer labeled miscellaneous, that somehow still wasn't allowed to be messy. Calm, structured, grounded. The opposite of everything her family represented. Especially Maya. Maya Bennett, the golden child, sparkled in a way that made everyone forgive her for burning the house down, sometimes figuratively, sometimes almost literally. Growing up, Iris had watched her sister glow while she herself did the fixing. The apologies, the phone calls, the last-minute rescues, the emotional stitching of wounds Maya never acknowledged she caused. And when adulthood arrived, the pattern only evolved. It never disappeared. Whenever a number from home popped up, Iris didn't think, oh, they're calling to check on me. She thought, what now? Because she had become her family's designated emergency contact, in all ways except officially. 6 months ago proved that better than anything. The Bennetts were drowning in a mortgage crisis of their own making. Overspending, missed payments, and a disastrously timed renovation Maya had convinced their parents they deserved. By the time Iris flew down to look at the paperwork, the house was 30 days from foreclosure. And somehow, everyone acted surprised. The bailout required everything Iris could pull together. Liquidating long-term investments she'd been growing for 12 years, selling the rental property she had bought as her safety net, draining her emergency fund until she felt physically winded. The final total came out to $520,000. A number so large it made her attorney, Daniel Reyes, stare at her like she just confessed she planned to buy an island. Daniel insisted they sign a formal repayment agreement. It protects you, he said. And it ensures they take this seriously. She'd signed it with a shaking hand. Her parents signed with tight smiles. Maya signed with an expression that said she was doing Iris a favor, and after everything, after $500,000, after endless phone calls and document chases and late-night panic spirals, Iris still felt something shifting inside her family. Not gratitude, distance. They made plans without her. Group chats went silent. Voice notes were sent in a family thread she wasn't in. Birthday dinners, small celebrations, little gatherings. She found out from social media or from relatives who asked, innocently, "Why didn't you come?" It fermented into quiet resentment. The kind that doesn't explode, it erodes. And then last night it snapped at 12:03 a.m., her phone buzzed with a message from her mother, a text that looked almost rushed, almost guilty. "Iris, sweetheart, we've decided it's best if you sit out Thanksgiving this year. Things have been tense and we don't want any discomfort. We'll celebrate together another time." She sat up in bed, staring at the screen. Her chest didn't hurt. It felt empty. Hollow in a way she had never experienced before. She didn't respond. Not yet. 30 minutes later, Maya followed up with her own message, breezy in the way only someone who never faced consequences could manage. "Don't take it so seriously, Iris. You know how you get. It's just a dinner. You're being intense." And that was it. That was the moment. No yelling. No dramatic paragraph. No explanation. Just one word. The only word Iris had left. Noted. If you've ever stayed silent not because you were weak, but because you finally understood your worth. Keep listening. What would you do with that folder in your hands? Comment if you've ever had to choose between family and self-respect. For a long moment, Iris just sat there on the edge of her bed, the glow of her phone screen fading while those two messages replayed in her mind. Not the uninvitation, she could almost understand that. Families avoided discomfort the same way they avoided mirrors. Selectively. It was Maya's word that lodged somewhere deep and raw, intense. A lifetime of being the responsible one had been summarized into a single word meant to belittle, not describe. If Maya had called her angry, dramatic, or harsh, Iris could have laughed. But intense. That was the family's favorite gaslighting word. The one they used when Iris asked for accountability, boundaries, or even just basic respect. Suddenly every memory aligned like a ledger. Was she intense when she covered Maya's credit card debt in college so their parents wouldn't find out? Was she intense the night she picked their father up from the roadside at 2 a.m. because he'd insisted he was fine to drive, and then wasn't? Was she intense when she spent hours talking her mother through panic attacks caused by bills Maya promised she'd paid? Was it intensity or responsibility that made her sacrifice $500,000 so her family wouldn't lose their house? If she were truly intense, she would have said no. Instead, she'd said yes. Quietly, consistently, predictably. And that was the problem. Silence wasn't seen as grace in her family. It was seen as permission. As the bitterness drained out, something else took its place. Not anger, clarity. A cold, steady clarity that felt more like a decision than an emotion. She stood, walked into the loft's small storage nook, and tapped the keypad on the tall charcoal safe she kept against the wall. Most people stored valuables, heirlooms, jewelry. Iris stored documents, tax files, investment papers, and one particular folder she'd hoped she'd never need again. The agreement. When the lock clicked open, she reached inside and pulled out the thick manila binder Daniel had prepared. She remembered the way he'd watched her family sign it. Eyes sharp, jaw tensed, protective in the way only friends who understood betrayal could be. "They're not reading this," Daniel had whispered. "They never do," Iris had replied. Inside, the terms were clear. Painfully clear. Repayment plan. Asset responsibilities. And the most important line. If her family failed to meet financial expectations within 6 months, this very week, Thanksgiving week, the ownership of the house legally shifted, giving Iris control over sale, rental decisions, or repossession. They'd signed it because they never believed she'd enforce it. Because Iris had always been a doormat with excellent credit. Not anymore. Her thumb brushed the page, and she felt her heartbeat steady into something calm, firm, final. They had mistaken kindness for weakness. They had mistaken silence for compliance. They were about to learn the difference. Have you ever documented someone's behavior, knowing one day you'd need proof? Maya had no idea what was coming. The folder in Iris's hands felt heavier than paper should allow, as if the weight of 6 months, 6 years, maybe even 3 decades of family dynamics had compressed into those pages. She carried it to her desk, set it down gently, and opened her laptop. If her emotions were flickering, her process wasn't. This was where Iris thrived. Not in chaos, but in clarity. Her records, directory sat neatly organized, broken into labeled subfolders. She clicked the one titled, Bennett, Financial Support. Inside it lived a full ecosystem of truth. PDFs, receipts, email confirmations, statements, and a CSV she'd built herself using Pupaparse, because even her heartbreak was formatted with clean data structures. She scrolled through the contents, screenshots of bank transfers, payment receipts from the mortgage company, confirmation emails from her investment accounts the day she liquidated them. And, most damning of all, spending logs she'd tracked when her parents asked her why the account kept emptying faster than they could refill it. The pattern was unmistakable. Maya wasn't just draining the accounts. She was living out of them. Deliveries, boutique purchases, impulsive trips, cosmetic appointments, subscription boxes, and a series of emergency payments that somehow always aligned with nights out. It wasn't a leak. It was a pipeline. Iris took a slow breath, selected everything relevant, and compressed it into a single folder labeled Thanksgiving. Evidence. Her finger hovered over the trackpad for a moment before she clicked save. The loft felt different now, like the air had shifted, becoming stiller, sharper, more aligned with the truth she'd ignored for too long. Finally, at 1:42 a.m., she picked up her phone and dialed Daniel. He answered on the third ring, voice groggy but instantly alert once he registered her name. "Iris, are you okay? I need you to prepare the notice," she said, her tone steady as glass. "Before Thanksgiving." There was silence, not confusion but calculation, as Daniel woke fully. "You want it delivered before?" he asked carefully. "Are you sure? I'm done being taken for granted." Daniel exhaled slowly, the kind of exhale people make when something long overdue finally happens. "All right, I'll draft everything tonight. You'll have it to sign in the morning." The call ended, but its impact didn't. Her loft, usually a calming sanctuary filled with warm lamps and minimalist decor, felt charged, like the moment right before a storm breaks and clears the sky. She walked to the tall windows overlooking downtown Seattle, watching the reflections of streetlights shimmer on rain-slicked pavement behind her. Her phone buzzed, a long thread of messages had begun to roll in. Mom. Sweetheart, we didn't mean to hurt you. Mom. Things have just been sensitive lately. Mom. We'll make it up to you later. Later. In her family, later meant never disguised as a promise. Maya's text arrived next. Don't make this dramatic. Come for dessert if you want. Iris set the phone face down. Her silence wasn't passive this time. It was deliberate, purposeful. A calm before a lesson on Thanksgiving night, while Maya carved her picture-perfect dinner and posed for photos, a knock would come at the door. Not aggressive, not vindictive. Elegant, legal, undeniable. Consequences, signed, certified, time-stamped. And Maya had no idea what was coming. Can you imagine the moment they realized what they'd done? Drop a comment if you've ever served someone their own consequences. Seattle woke covered in a thick, cold fog, the kind that made every street lamp look like it was glowing underwater. But inside the Bennett house, Maya had been awake since dawn, determined to create the perfect Thanksgiving tableau. She moved around the kitchen with the self-satisfaction of someone rehearsing for an audience. Her cream-colored dress matched the linen napkins she'd ironed the night before. Her hair fell in deliberately soft curls. The dining table gleamed, gold chargers, eucalyptus runner, place cards written in calligraphy she'd practiced for a week. This wasn't a family dinner. This was a performance, and she had invited an audience. By 10:30 a.m., her supervisor, Elise Tran, impeccably dressed in slate wool and a tailored blouse, stepped into the house holding a bottle of wine. Maya, this looks incredible, she said, eyes sweeping the staged perfection. Behind Elise came two colleagues Maya frequently name-dropped. Today was her chance to show them the stable, elegant family life she'd always boasted about. Her parents hovered in the background. Exhausted from a week of financial juggling, Maya didn't even pretend to understand. But Maya soaked in the compliments anyway, glowing under Elise's approval. Her mother, trying her best to play hostess, leaned toward her guests with an apologetic smile. Iris couldn't make it this year, she said. She needed some space. Maya added a breezy. She gets overwhelmed sometimes. As if Iris were a distant cousin and not the woman who saved the house they were standing in. Her father shot her a look, a mixture of warning and fatigue. But Maya was too busy basking in her curated reality to notice. The house hummed with quiet bragging, simmering dishes, and the fake warmth of a family pretending everything was fine. And then, at 11:42 a.m., the doorbell rang. Her mother perked up. Oh, that must be the pumpkin dessert I ordered. She hurried toward the door, smoothing her blouse. Maya followed with a bright smile, ready to warmly greet whatever delivery helped complete her aesthetic. But when the door opened, the man standing there didn't hold a dessert box. He held a flat envelope and a sealed document package, both stamped with the unmistakable blue and gray legal header of Reyes and Associates. Delivery for Mrs. Bennett, he said. Her mother frowned. This isn't the bakery. No, ma'am. Requires a signature. Her father, stepping closer, froze when he saw the sender's name printed across the top corner. Daniel Reyes. Iris's attorney. His voice cracked as he spoke. Why is Daniel sending us? Maya cut in with a nervous laugh. Maybe it's nothing. Probably just paperwork stuff. You know how Iris is. But her smile wavered. The delivery man handed over a stylus. Her mother signed, still confused, still holding on to the idea of dessert. Once the door closed, her father insisted sharply. Open it. Now. Inside the envelope were 3 neatly bound document sets, each labeled and tabbed. Her mother flipped to the first page and immediately paled. Document set 1. Formal agreement reminder. The original bailout contract. Repayment terms. Responsibilities. Conditions. Timelines. And the highlighted clause. End of 6-month grace period. November 23rd, Thanksgiving week. The line beneath it read. This serves as formal notice of clause activation. Her mother's hand trembled. Oh my God! Document set 2. Payment history. Dates, amounts, missed deadlines. Every number Iris had contributed. Every number her parents had failed to return. Her father swallowed hard. We knew we were behind, but... His voice broke completely. We signed this. We signed all of this. His eyes lifted toward Maya, who had gone unnaturally still. Document set 3. Transfer and withdrawal summary. The evidence packet. Every expense. Every unexplained withdrawal. Every emergency that aligned with Maya's spending trail. Elise, the supervisor, stepped closer, curiosity turning into shock. Maya, she said slowly, your files at work said you had substantial personal savings. You told us you were helping your parents, not the other way around. I don't remember signing anything, Maya stammered, flipping through the pages in a panic. This doesn't look. You were sitting right there, her father said, voice sharp for the first time in years. You signed as the witness. Maya shook her head, curls trembling. Iris wouldn't actually. Her mother clasped the documents, eyes filling with dread. She wouldn't let the house go. She wouldn't do this to us. But the evidence didn't care about denial, her mother gasped as she reached the final summary page. The projected buyback cost versus rent option, the new market value, the overdue total, the legal consequences. Her breath hitched. Then, in a whisper that broke the entire illusion Maya had worked so hard to build, she said, Call her. Call Iris right now. Have you ever had to hang up on family to save yourself? Comment respect if you think she did the right thing. The calls started at 11:58 at IT first. They came one by one. Her mother, then her father, then Maya. But within minutes they stacked into a frantic rhythm, buzzing across Iris's kitchen counter like a trapped insect. BY 12:23 p.m. Her phone showed 32 missed calls. Iris didn't touch it. She simply watched it light up, fade, light up again, a pattern she knew well. Panic when they needed her. Silence when she needed them. The screen buzzed once more, vibrating against the marble. She exhaled slowly and at last, flipped it over. Incoming call. Dad, she answered. Hello, she said, her voice calm, even colder than they'd ever heard it. Her father's breath poured through the line, shaky, frantic. Iris, we received something. Some documents. I know, she said simply. You didn't need to do this, he said desperately. Not today. Her eyes narrowed at the window. The Seattle skyline washed in a soft gray drizzle. You told me not to come, she replied. I respected that. There was a stunned pause, as if he'd forgotten that part before he could respond. Her mother's voice suddenly appeared, pressed close to the receiver. Iris, sweetheart, this is a misunderstanding. We didn't mean for any of this. But Iris interrupted quietly. You signed the agreement. You understood the terms. No, your father and I didn't think you'd actually. A scuffle. Then Maya's voice shoved its way in. You're ruining Thanksgiving. Maya snapped. Do you know how embarrassing this is? My supervisor is right here. Everyone heard. You've humiliated me. There it was, the truth. Not regret. Embarrassment. Iris leaned back against her counter, expression flat. This isn't about your reputation, she said. This is about accountability. Oh, please, Maya sneered. You're punishing us. You punished yourselves, Iris replied, tone still steady. I'm simply enforcing what we all agreed to. For the first time since the call began, silence took over. Not the confused kind, the realizing kind. Then her father's voice, defeated, soft. What do we do now? Iris didn't hesitate. You have two options, she said. Buy back the house at the market value listed. Or begin paying rent under the terms outlined. It's all in the documents. Her mother inhaled sharply as if stabbed. You know we can't afford that. Maya jumped back in, voice cracking. We can't. The accounts are empty, the credit lines are maxed. Because you drained them, Iris said. All of you. I did not. Maya stopped, glancing around the room, realizing her supervisor Elise was staring right at her. Elise's expression wasn't shocked anymore. It was disappointed. And that was worse. Maya's voice grew smaller. I told them. I told everyone at work. Had savings. That I was helping you. She swallowed. I didn't think Iris would. Iris finished for her. Tell the truth. It's humiliating, Maya whispered, voice trembling. Do you know what this makes me look like? Iris's tone didn't waver. I will no longer protect you from the truth. Maya's breath stuttered, like she'd been slapped not by force, but by clarity. In the background, Iris could hear the murmur of her parents, the rustling of papers, Elise asking quietly, Is all of this accurate? Maya didn't answer. Her father finally spoke again, sounding decades older. Iris, we never thought you'd do this. I know, she said. That's why you thought you could keep taking. Her mother tried one last time. We can talk about this. Maybe there's another way. There isn't, Iris said. Not anymore. For a moment, nobody breathed. Then she ended it with the same words she had told Daniel the night before. I'm done being taken for granted. And with absolute calm. Not anger, not guilt, not hesitation. Iris hung up. Not in rage. Not in spite. But in freedom. The lake house was quiet now, though the echoes of laughter and forced compliments still lingered in the corners. Maya's colleagues had left early, murmuring polite goodbyes that carried the unmistakable weight of discomfort. Even Elise, the supervisor, avoided eye contact, her mind clearly replaying every document, every screenshot, every transfer Iris had exposed. The evidence packet had left an imprint, not just on the family, but on the image Maya had so meticulously curated. That carefully constructed persona, poised, perfect, in control, had collapsed in an instant. The dining room, once immaculately staged, looked abandoned. Napkins strewn, a faint smear of gravy on a charger, a wine glass left half full. It was as though the house itself had sighed in relief after a week of rehearsed smiles and suppressed truths. Iris's parents, however, were the ones who truly bore the weight of the day. They huddled in the kitchen, papers spread across the counter, calculators at the ready, faces pale. As they began to sort through their finances, the depth of Maya's spending revealed itself in harsh clarity. Statements that had seemed minor in isolation now formed a pattern of reckless indulgence that had been hidden behind excuses and selective memory. Shock gave way to shame. And as the minutes ticked by, shame slowly morphed into accountability. For the first time, they saw the patterns clearly. Months of untracked spending, ignored bills, and the habitual reliance on Iris to patch over the mess. And for the first time, they didn't reach for their phones, didn't call her to fix it, didn't try to explain it away. The silence was heavy, but not cold. It wasn't punishment. It was the gravity of truth settling into every corner of the room. Years of denial, of taking Iris for granted, lifted slowly, replaced by a quiet reckoning. Maya, sitting at the edge of the now messy table, finally looked around, her cheeks flushed and her hands trembling. Her eyes met no one's, avoiding both her colleagues and her parents. The perfection she had worked so hard to present was gone, replaced by the raw and uncomfortable reality of consequences she had refused to acknowledge until now. In that quiet aftermath, Iris's absence was felt, but not mourned. The heavy silence carried lessons that no amount of excuses could undo. When was the last time you felt real peace after setting a boundary? Tell me in the comments. Boundaries or family harmony? A week had passed, and the fog over Seattle had lifted, leaving the air crisp and clean. Iris wandered the familiar streets, letting her boots crunch over wet pavement, the cityscape a blur of reflective puddles and golden streetlights. For the first time in years, she felt the world no longer tilting toward everyone else's needs, as if a weight she hadn't realized she'd been carrying had finally been set down. It wasn't relief exactly. Nor was it anger. It was balance. That fragile equilibrium where the chaos of her family's demands no longer dictated the rhythm of her life. During that week, the silence from her family had been different. Not cold, not dismissive, thoughtful, measured. Their calls came sparingly, tentative. No urgent crises. No frantic demands. Just space, and then finally her father reached out. Iris, he said, voice soft but steady, can we have an honest conversation? There were no excuses, no guilt trips. No attempts to manipulate her into taking back the consequences she had enforced. Instead, he admitted simply and plainly that he had been blind. Blind to Maya's pattern, blind to how much he had relied on her generosity, blind to the fact that he had never really seen her mother followed with her own acknowledgement, not wrapped in love or sacrifice, not framed as an apology for the chaos they had allowed, but as a clear admission of failure. She had prioritized Maya, trying to protect her at Iris's expense, and now saw it plainly. The house situation remained uncertain. The 6-month clause, the options, the financial realities, they were all still there, unresolved. But for the first time, Iris recognized that the uncertainty was not hers to carry. The consequences were theirs to live, and she no longer had to bear the burden of fixing what they had broken. She walked past the sparkling reflections on Lake Union. The skyline stretched above her in quiet majesty. She felt a rare clarity, the kind that comes when boundaries are set and finally respected. Iris's life was no longer a ledger of other people's failures. It was hers, measured, steady, and entirely her own. And for the first time in years, she could breathe without apology. A month had passed since Thanksgiving, but the shift it sparked was still reverberating through Iris's life. One afternoon her father called, his tone smaller, gentler, human in a way it hadn't been before. "Iris, could we meet again? Just to talk." There was no pleading, no frantic apologies, no attempt to sway her with guilt. Just a quiet request. She agreed. When they arrived at her favorite cafe in Seattle, they carried themselves differently. No defensive postures, no passive-aggressive smiles. Their eyes met hers without calculation, and their words were measured. "We've been taking your loyalty for granted," her father began. "We see that now." Her mother nodded. "We've allowed patterns that were unfair. We put Maya above you, expecting you to absorb everything, to fix everything. That stops now." Iris listened, her hands wrapped around a steaming mug of tea. The weight of decades didn't vanish, but the absence of manipulation made the air lighter. For once, the conversation was about honesty, not damage control. Maya was absent, not invited, not present. Her silence spoke volumes. For the first time, she could not hide behind charm, excuses, or staged perfection. The professional fallout and personal embarrassment of her choices had already done their work, leaving her out of the room. And out of the power dynamic she used to control, her parents continued, acknowledging the real pattern of behavior, naming things they had ignored or rationalized for years. They spoke of love without servitude, of appreciation without exploitation. "We understand that boundaries aren't cruel," her father said. "They're healthy. And we respect yours." Iris felt a calm settle into her chest, a clarity that had nothing to do with revenge or retribution. For the first time, her family seemed ready to rebuild, without putting the weight of their mistakes on her shoulders. The discussion didn't attempt to erase the past. It didn't pretend that $520,000 hadn't been spent, or that their errors could simply be forgiven. Instead, it focused on the new dynamic, the one where accountability existed alongside care, and respect replaced expectation. Iris realized the subtle power of this moment. She no longer had to manage everyone's emotions, fix every crisis, or absorb every failure. The relationship wasn't about emergencies anymore. It was about genuine connection, grounded in mutual respect. Tentative steps, yes. Cautious and deliberate. But real. By the time coffee was finished and the conversation ended, Iris understood something fundamental. Love in her family no longer meant servitude. Boundaries were not punishments. They were the foundation for something better. And for the first time, she saw the possibility of a relationship that didn't revolve around her constant intervention, one built on honesty, fairness, and respect. The transformation wasn't dramatic or loud. It was quiet, measured, and profound. For Iris, that was more than enough. Which lesson hits hardest for you? Have you ever been the family fixer? Tell me your story. Iris Bennett's story is more than a single family's drama. It is a blueprint for understanding the fragile, often unspoken dynamics that run through many households. She learned, painfully and definitively, that boundaries are not optional. They are essential. Kindness, she realized, can be mistaken for weakness. Silence can be interpreted as consent. Years of stepping in, of smoothing over crises, of paying debts and covering mistakes, had not created gratitude. It had created expectation. She had been the family's fixer, the default problem solver, the emergency contact for every calamity, all without asking if it was fair. Being the responsible one comes at a cost. Financially, emotionally, spiritually. Families often assign roles without consent, creating invisible hierarchies. The golden child allowed to shine unchecked, the scapegoat expected to absorb every disruption. Maya had thrived, protected by enablers, while Iris carried the weight of reality. Iris also discovered the critical importance of documentation. Screenshots, bank statements, detailed tracking of payments and transfers. These weren't just tools for legal enforcement. They were shields, protection against manipulation, denial, and selective memory. Even within families, legal agreements can safeguard relationships by establishing clarity and accountability. She saw how keeping the peace can actually foster chaos. By always intervening, she had inadvertently enabled poor behavior, allowed patterns to persist, and absorbed consequences that weren't hers to bear. Enforcement of agreed-upon terms, while uncomfortable, creates real change. Accountability is not cruelty. It is the mechanism that allows families to see themselves clearly, to recognize harm, and to correct course. Most importantly, Iris recognized the transformation that comes from self-respect. Choosing yourself, setting limits, saying no when you have given everything. These are not acts of selfishness. They are acts of love for oneself and, ultimately, for those around you. Real love does not demand servitude. It includes respect, boundaries, and the recognition that every individual has a right to their own peace and stability. By the end, Iris had gained something far more valuable than revenge, a quiet, unwavering freedom. The peace that follows authentic boundaries, the balance of empathy without self-sacrifice, and the knowledge that enough is, in fact, enough. Iris Bennett stands in her Seattle loft, the late afternoon sun reflecting off her windows and warming the edges of the space she calls her own. This is peace. Not the performative calm she once sought in others' approval, but the real kind. The peace that comes from standing firmly in truth, unapologetically, knowing her worth isn't measured by sacrifice or endless service. Her family has learned, in varying degrees, that she cannot be taken for granted. Maya is facing the slow, unavoidable collapse of a reputation built on charm and lies, while her parents are finally reckoning with the consequences of enabling behavior. And Iris. She moves forward with boundaries intact, free from the weight of solving problems that were never hers to fix. Her life is still unfolding. The house situation remains uncertain, the family dynamics ever evolving, but the responsibility is no longer hers alone. She continues her work as a systems analyst, invests wisely, and walks through Seattle with a steady rhythm, building a future that does not wait for anyone's approval, that does not bend to expectations that never served her. If she could speak to her past self, she would say this: the word no is your greatest ally. Freedom is not being alone. It's being true to yourself. And that truth resonates not just in finance or family, but in every choice she makes. If you were in my place, what would you have done? Drop your thoughts below. If this story resonated, hit subscribe. Share it if you know someone who needs to hear it. Your story matters too. Tell me in the comments. Have you ever had to choose yourself over family expectations? Team Iris or Team Family? Let me know why. Iris's journey is ongoing, but one thing is certain. Peace, respect, and self-worth are hers, and hers alone. And for anyone listening, that is a freedom worth fighting for.